Night drifts over the Tigris like ink spilled across parchment, swallowing minarets, date palms, and the faint gleam of mosaic domes that once bragged the Abbasid world's command of geometry. Somewhere beyond the eastern horizon, however, the darkness is pierced by red pinpricks, campfires ringing Baghdad in a vast, deliberate constellation. Mongol sentries squat beside them, leather lamellar creaking each time they glance toward the city walls. Their orders are as stark as the winter air. No prayer, no plea, no library manuscript is to survive if the Caliph resists. In the stillness between patrols, you can almost hear the murmur of the great Khan's decree, carried down the steppe like an autumn plague. Break his city, break his spirit, break his river, then salt the memory. Inside the walls, Caliph al-Mustaʿṣim paces marble corridors built by Harun al-Rashid 4 centuries earlier. Corridors whose every arch once echoed with philosophy debates and oud melodies. He fingers prayer beads cut from Yemeni agate, whispering assurances that Allah will shatter the infidel as he did at Ain Jalut. But the Mongols at Ain Jalut were scouts, not Hulagu's elite 2 men. In scholars' quarters, astronomer Nasir al-Din al-Tusi recalculates eclipse tables that may never see a scribe's brush. In the House of Wisdom, translators debate whether to smuggle Euclid west or burn the shelves to deny the enemy. The winter wind, smelling of river mud and distant horse sweat, slips through arrow slits, delivering a more urgent calculation. Hulagu's ultimatum expires at dawn. If you press your ear to that wind, you will find it carries 2 contradictory prophecies, one chanted by Baghdad's imams, the other carved into Mongol arrow shafts. And before the month ends, only one will remain to write the next chapter of civilization. The story of how the greatest library on earth came to the brink of obliteration does not begin in Baghdad. It begins on the frozen steppe of Karakorum, where, in 1251, Hulagu Khan, grandson of Genghis, assumes the throne of a horse-born empire already controlling half the known world. Hulagu divides the next phase of conquest among trusted siblings. To his brother Kublai, he assigns China, to Arik Bokeh, the safeguarding of Mongolia, and to Hulagu, the tall, brooding strategist whose Persian advisors call him the sober storm, he grants the Near East. Hulagu's writ is explicit: crush the fortresses of the assassins, then extinguish the Abbasid Caliphate as a torch drowned in rain, clearing the path for Mongol power to pierce Egypt and perhaps even the Latin kingdoms. Hulagu recruits not only Mongol warriors, but tributary levies, Georgian heavy infantry eager to avenge Seljuk raids, Armenian engineers versed in Roman Torsian artillery, and Chinese sappers who can mix gunpowder satchels that cough sulfur ghosts through tunnel mouths. Caravan masters hauling siege lumber joke that they're building a mobile forest. No one laughs long. From Azerbaijan southward, the Mongol advance feels less like an army and more like a cosmic correction. In 1256, they reduce the Alamut fortress, legendary eagle's nest of the Nizari assassins, by dragging giant siege towers up goat paths and pelting defenders with naphtha bombs until stone walls pop like kiln-fired clay. Hassan Sabbah's ideological heirs tumble from battlements, scarves aflame, their mystique dying mid-scream. Hulagu gives surviving assassins a brutally honest choice: serve as local intelligence or join your brethren in the ravine. Many accept the bribe of survival. Their maps will soon guide Mongol columns along caravan trails once taxed by the Caliph's bureaucrats. Baghdad at this point is a paradox. Its golden age, when astronomers revised Ptolemy, physicians mapped optic nerves, and poets like al-Mutanabbi rewired Arabic, has cooled but not vanished. The city still pulses with 800,000 souls, 30,000 baths, and the glitter of trade that drifts up from Indian Ocean towers. Yet politically, it is hollow. Caliphs, after al-Mustaʿṣim's grandfather, contented themselves with ceremony, while real power leaked to viziers, atabegs, and distant Mamluk regents. The treasury is shallow, the army thinner, comprising mostly city levies, and a restless corps of Turkish gulams who have not been paid in months. Warnings stream in. Refugees from Hamadan babble that Mongols crucified imams on minarets. Letters from Mosul describe rivers clogged with corpses used as pontoon bridges. Al-Mustaʿṣim's chief minister, the ambitious yet catastrophically short-sighted Ibn al-Alqami, counsels appeasement, send polite letters, offer token tribute. Trust in the city's aura. Baghdad's imams echo him, citing prophetic hadith that claim the city will never fall to an external foe. On parchment, fatalism looks like faith. Hulagu answers letters with envoys bearing a message inscribed on tablets of birch bark. Open your gates, demolish your walls, present yourself in humble submission, or suffer the wrath that erased Nishapur. Al-Mustaʿṣim dithers, send ambassadors or send armies. He consults astrologers who promise Mars will favor the crescent. He dispatches pleas to Cairo's Mamluk Sultan and to the Crusader Prince of Antioch, unlikely allies. Cairo, preoccupied with Syrian frontier squabbles, sends prayers. Antioch sends silence. Mongol trade routes have been good for Frankish merchants. By the time the Caliph's war council agrees to muster, Mongol vanguards have seized the citadels at Hulwan and Tikrit, effectively corking Baghdad inside a narrowing hourglass. Winter 1257 crystallizes into glassy cold. Hulagu's siege train arrives on the Tigris's eastern bank like a traveling mountain range. Tens of thousands of horses, yaks dragging trebuchet beams thicker than mosque pillars, carts stacked with Chinese rockets. The Sultan arrays his army in two wings, his brother Ilkash on the west side to cut off escape across the Euphrates, his own banner on the east to hammer the city proper. As each trebuchet is assembled, it receives a name. Monks from Georgian contingents inscribe crosses on counterweights, believing vengeance against Muslims absolves any sin. Chinese engineers unfurl silk blueprints detailing a device new to the Western Islamic world, the huochong, a metal barrel that vomits flaming arrows propelled by saltpeter powder. Inside Baghdad, panic metastasizes. The Caliph orders the walls double-manned. Archers paid in advance with IOUs. Citizens unroll old siege manuals copied from Byzantium, trying to retrofit ballistae that haven't been fired since Seljuk days. The Tigris, source of life, becomes complicity. Its loops hem in the city, offering Mongol engineers natural moats for deploying pontoons. When Jerusalem's patriarch heard of Saladin's encirclement, he wept. Baghdad's ulama hold emergency dhikr sessions, seeking divine pulse. But the night sky remains a frozen vault, indifferent. The opening salvo erupts on 29 January 1258. On Hulagu's signal, 400 trebuchets loose basalt boulders that whistle overhead like angry planets. Impact turns adobe suburbs to brown mist. Within hours, the east wall's outer parapet fractures. Baghdad's artillery replies feebly, stone throwers lacking range, arrows skittering off rawhide tower skins. By sunset, Mongol sappers, covered by shield rows, have begun mining beneath the Kukia Gate. The Caliph dispatches a sortie of 700 cavalry. Mongol horse archers swallow them, their withdrawal feigned, their counter-encirclement textbook. A rare thunderstorm on the 1st February offers false hope. Rain slickens siege ramps. Bogs Trebuchet wheels. Baghdad's defenders cheer when a lightning strike ignites a Mongol powder depot, sending a mushroom of green flame skyward. Hulagu shrugs off the omen. He rotates fresh troops forward, has captured locals fill mud pits with fascines, and resumes bombardment by midnight. The real killer is psychological. Each morning, Mongols catapult severed heads of captured scouts over the walls, accompanied by scrolls that list the Caliph's miscalculations in calligraphed Persian. One head belongs to Ibn al-Alqami's distant cousin, a message the vizier cannot misinterpret. On 5 February, the western wing under Ilkhash completes a pontoon bridge across the Euphrates, sealing every outlet. Grain prices inside the walls triple in a day. Water draws from cisterns, clay thick and wormy. Deserters attempt to swim the Tigris at night, only to be caught by Mongol patrol boats crewed by experienced Khitan sailors who slice throats and return heads for the trebuchets. Citizens wander bazaars seeking amulets. Sellers quote Isaiah, Job, or the Quran's Surah Al-Fil about the elephant army destroyed by birds of flame, hoping God will dispatch similar winged artillery. Instead, on 9th February, Mongol miners collapse a 50-yard span of wall north of the Shamasiya Gate. Hulagu holds back his main force, ordering only 10,000 to test the breach. Baghdad's gulams plug the gap in a frenzy of spear and scimitar, but each minute costs them blood they cannot replace. Behind city lines, Nasir al-Din al-Tusi is escorted out under guard. Hulagu has requested the astronomers' safe passage, promising a new observatory in Maraga. Scholars see the escort and despair. If the House of Wisdom's oracle leaves, the city's fate is mathematically sealed. Even now, al-Mustaʿṣim might sue for terms. Hulagu has left avenues for negotiation. Tents with white flags stand ready on the eastern embankment. Yet the Caliph hesitates, shackled by the myth that Abbasid blood guarantees divine intervention. His last embassy rides out on chapter 10 February, carrying gifts, Qur'ans bound in lapis, sable fur cloaks, a promise of annual tribute. Hulagu's interpreter reads the letter, coolly noting its submissive tone but conditional wording. He rips it in half, stating that conditions ended the day Baghdad declined the first summons. The ambassadors are detained, their ears and noses removed as signature of Mongol contempt. When their mutilated bodies are hauled back by city fishermen, any remaining will to resist collapses. On 12th February, the final assault commences. Rockets hiss over walls in arcing blossoms. Flaming naphtha pots burst against wooden gates, atomizing hinges. Hulagu's heavy cavalry, armor laced with jaguar skin, thunder through breached sectors, sabers singing against lamplight. Resistance persists in pockets. Tartar archers find themselves fighting stairwell to stairwell, where desperate defenders roll millstones from battlements, crushing men and horses alike. In the famed Souk al-Atarin, apothecary jars explode under torch contact, releasing clouds of arsenic-tinged smoke that blind attackers and defenders indiscriminately. But for every street the Mongols clear, a dozen more buckle under fear's weight. The Caliph retreats to his palace, a labyrinth of gardens, turquoise fountains, and storerooms filled with incense resins imported from Zanzibar. He orders palace eunuchs to barricade the bronze gate, but by dusk sees his own guards melting away. Ibn al-Alqami counsels surrender, anything to spare the sanctuaries. At dawn on 13th February, al-Mustaʿṣim rides a mule across a makeshift pontoon to Hulagu's command tent, carrying the Abbasid seal and keys to the city. Chroniclers disagree on his attire. Some say he wore white mourning robes, others that he donned black caliphal vestments, but all note his voice trembled when he greeted the Khan in Arabic-laced Persian, offering obedience for the sake of the Prophet's city. Hulagu listens, expression unreadable, then gestures to a mound. The true cross had been inverted. Here stands the false throne, he says, pointing to a pyramid of skulls crowned with a tattered black Abbasid banner. Hulagu accepted the Caliph's keys with the composure of a man retrieving a debt long overdue. His lips barely moved as the translator pronounced a verdict already etched in Mongol stone. Baghdad would be spared looting only if its garrison disarmed at once, surrendered every store of weaponry, and delivered 100 of its highest officials, including viziers, judges, and the entire Abbasid household, into Mongol custody. The Caliph agreed, compelled by what seemed a lifeline. But the next hours proved the promise a mirage. As gates along the eastern walls swung open and columns of exhausted defenders trudged out to stack their scimitars in heaps, Hulagu's officers quietly ordered new towers rolled forward, scaling ladders positioned, and torches soaked in naphtha. The sack began on the morning of 14th February 1258. It did not erupt in a single thunderclap. It unfolded like a crimson tide, moving district by district. Predictable, methodical, irreversible. Mongol detachments entered the Souk al-Khuld first, where coppersmiths once hammered elegant astrolabes for Andalusian astronomers. They demolished bolts of brocade to reach hidden vaults, split water jars to be sure no jewels hid in the sludge, then torched the timber roofs. Sparks drifted down like false snow, landing on the palm-thatched stalls of the grain market and setting them alight. Wind off the Tigris fanned the flames eastward into residential quarters packed with cedar balconies. Women threw mattresses saturated with vinegar onto the conflagration. The vinegar hissed, the fire laughed, and wooden lattices exploded into kindling. Elsewhere, a different tragedy spread. Rolling squads of archers cleared streets for engineers tasked with disabling aqueduct inlets. Huge iron valves were shattered by sledges, diverting freshwater channels back into the river and leaving cisterns to drain dry. Within hours, most remaining wells filled with ash mud. Survivors would later recall thirst more than terror. Mouths coated in grit, lips splitting as they begged any soldier, Mongol or looter, for a sip. At the Grand Mosque of al-Mutawakkil, imams formed a chain, Qur'ans held above their heads, chanting Surat al-Fil in trembling baritone. A Mongol commander allegedly halted, listened, then motioned his men aside. For a shining instant, the imams hoped sanctuary was possible. Instead, the commander had merely delayed them until a giant siege pole, repurposed as a battering beam, arrived to crush the courtyard doors. When they splintered, the chanting snapped into screams. Ink-black smoke climbed the spiral minaret. smoke laced with the vapors of burning manuscripts, because the mosque's attached madrasa had housed a copy of Avicenna's canon, annotated by 3 centuries of physicians. As the roof collapsed, parchment fluttered upward like flocks of scorched doves before dissolving into ember. The House of Wisdom, Beit al-Hikma, suffered a still stranger fate. Doors were breached, but instead of indiscriminate torching, Chinese and Persian engineers selected volumes on hydraulics, astronomy, and siege mathematics, crating them for shipment to Maraga. Hulagu had promised al-Tusi an observatory. Here was its seed collection. Everything else, literature, theology, poetry, was condemned. Mongol troopers flung armloads of books off the Tigris bridges, so many that, eyewitnesses said, a man could walk across the river stepping on bound folios rather than water. Ink dissolved into blue-black clouds, staining the current for miles downstream. Fishermen days later swore the fish bellies were dyed charcoal and tasted of tannin. In the Caliphal palace, looters discovered orchards paved with glazed tiles, each tile painted with verses from the Mu'allaqat. They pried them up, mistaking faience for turquoise stone. Treasure chambers surrendered emerald goblets from India, rock crystal ewers from Fatimid Cairo, and rolls of silk embroidered with dragons, tribute from the very Mongols who now plundered it back. The Caliph's private zoo was loosed, whether by fleeing servants or for sport. Lions prowled date groves until arrow volleys ended their brief freedom. One lion, cornered near the Mustaʿṣim madrasa, mauled 2 Georgian foot soldiers before Mongol bowstrings thrummed it down. Its skin was later stuffed with straw and sent east as a curiosity to Munka's court. What of al-Mustaʿṣim? For 3 days, he and his sons were kept under guarded hospitality, served simple meals while Hulagu assessed terms. Mongol custom forbade spilling royal blood on the earth. Princes were usually wrapped in felt and strangled, or trampled beneath horses. Chroniclers diverge on detail, but agree on result. On 17th of February, the last Abbasid Caliph was sewn into a rug and kicked to death by a company of soldiers, perhaps under Hulagu's gaze, perhaps on a date palm terrace overlooking the very river that had birthed his dynasty 500 years earlier. Legend holds his skull was dipped in molten silver and kept as a wine cup, a grim parody of the chalice he once called the Cup of Justice during Friday sermons. His treasury vizier, Ibn al-Alqami, expecting reward for counsel of appeasement, was executed the same morning. His headless body dangled from the main gate, a bilingual placard around its neck reading, "Broker of Empty Promises" in Persian and Arabic. By the time Hulagu ordered the fires doused, on 20th February, an estimated 200,000 corpses littered streets and courtyards. The stench forced Mongol camps to relocate upwind. Engineers breached canals to flush rot into the river. But the flood carried plague to Basra and beyond for months. Scholars debate the death toll, yet agree the intellectual toll was incalculable. One bishop traveling through decades later wrote that Babylon's destruction had been exceeded by Babylon's neighbor. Yet from ruin sprang unintended continuities. Nasir al-Din al-Tusi, installed at Maraga with the rescued scientific manuscripts, used Mongol patronage to compile star tables eclipsing Ptolemy's accuracy, influencing Copernicus centuries on. Papermakers fleeing Baghdad set up workshops in Damascus and Cairo, catalyzing textual reproduction that fed Mamluk bureaucracy. Sufi mystics, mourning the collapse of the Caliphate, spread orders north into Anatolia, where their poetry blended with Turkic folklore, sowing seeds for Rumi's whirling verse. Even European markets felt the tremor. Venetian merchants rerouted through Cilician ports, bringing tales of Mongol terror that would later color Dante's Inferno. Civilizations seldom end. They combust, seed, and germinate in unexpected furrows. Politically, the vacuum invited two successors. To the south, Mamluk Egypt positioned itself as Islam's sword-bearer. Sultan Baybars would use Hulagu's absence at Ain Jalut to halt Mongol advance, minting coins that proclaimed a revived caliphate under Cairo's watch. In the north, Ilkhanid Persia emerged, layering Mongol military ethos atop Persian administration. Ironically, those Ilkhanids converted to Islam within a generation, commissioning Qurans illuminated in cobalt previously reserved for Chinese porcelain, another testament to cultural fusion forged in fire. European Christendom, instead of rejoicing at Islam's eclipse, reacted with dread. Papal envoys had once dreamed of Mongol alliances against Muslims. Baghdad's obliteration revealed the price of such fire. King Louis IX of France referenced the sack when justifying fortress networks along the Rhone, lest Tartars one day reach our vineyards. Marco Polo, visiting decades after, described Baghdad's ruins as cautionary anchor. The world could turn suddenly to ash. Renaissance humanists, recovering Aristotelian texts through Arabic intermediaries, sensed an existential debt. Ink preserved by Muslim scholars, now rescued from oblivion by circumstance and Venetian traders. What of Baghdad itself? The Mongols attempted a rebuild, appointing Persian architects to design a square grid city north of the ruined round walls. But trade arteries shifted to Tabriz and later to Cairo. Irrigation channels, once marvels of Abbasid engineering, silted without maintenance. By the time Ibn Battuta visited in 1327, he found neighborhoods reclaimed by reeds, libraries humbled to single-room scriptoria. Yet still, the ghost of greatness lingered. He drank sherbet in a courtyard, where a lone muaddin called prayer from a half-collapsed minaret, proof that even shattered marble can echo. Modern archaeology has peeled back layers of this destruction. Magnetic surveys show burned strata 3 feet thick, coincident with the 1258 horizon. In 2015, a team excavated a collapsed wing of the Mustaʿṣim Madrasa and discovered fused glass fragments embedded in calcined marble. Bookshelves once lined with medical treatises, their pyre heat so intense it vitrified stone. Analysis revealed traces of cobalt and gold leaf, luxury pigments melted into slag. The find, tragic yet eloquent, became a traveling exhibit titled "When Libraries Weep Heat." The memory of Baghdad's fall also shaped 20th century geopolitics. In 1959, during negotiations over Iraq's new National Museum, scholar Sati al-Husri referenced Hulagu's atrocity to argue for urgent repatriation of manuscripts from Istanbul. In 2003, as looters ransacked Baghdad's National Library during modern war, curators invoked 1258 in pleas for international protection. "We have lived this nightmare once. Must we live it again?" The world's uneven response underscored Hulagu's lingering victory. Fear still travels faster than preservation. Thus, the siege that burned a civilization never fully ended. Its smoke drifts through diplomatic cables, cultural wounds, and even cyberspace, reminding humanity that knowledge is both fragile and migratory. One ruler's ashes are another dynasty's fertilizer. Every torch contains seeds. So here we stand, centuries later, staring into a river that once ran black with ink and red with blood, asking ourselves what flammable libraries we still guard poorly. The Tigris flows jade green again, reflecting satellite towers and plastic skiffs. But under its surface lie sediments of parchment dust, mute witnesses to hubris and hesitation. If this journey through conflagration and consequence sparked your determination to defend ideas before blades arrive, if it showed you how logistics, leadership, and lethal indifference can pivot history, carry that ember forward. Share this story with a friend who thinks the past is rubble. Show them how ashes fertilize futures. Tap that like button like a Mongol hammer, striking a battering ram. Your click signals the algorithm to keep ferrying epic lessons upstream to curious minds. Subscribe and ring the bell so our next expedition, perhaps to the bitter snows of Lake Peipus, the smoke-wreathed smokestacks of industrial Manchester, or the silent halls of Bletchley Park, finds you ready, pen in hand, water skin full, and unsheathe your sharpest questions below. Could the Caliph have survived through earlier submission? Did Hulagu foresee the cultural renaissance his carnage would paradoxically fuel? We read each query faster than a Mongol courier switching mounts on the Silk Road. History is a river layered with ink. Let's navigate its currents together before the next torch is lit.